Hello, and welcome to episode 109 of The Ethical Life, a place where each week we talk about the intersection of ethics and modern life. I'm Scott Rada, social media manager for Lee Enterprises, and as always, I am joined by Rick Kite, who is the head of the Ethics Institute at Viterbo University in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Hello, Rick.
Hi, Scott.
A competitive race for a seat in the Virginia House of Delegates has been in the spotlight since it was revealed that the Democratic candidate, Susanna Gibson, had streamed sex acts with her husband. As first reported by the Washington Post, the couple appeared on the website Chaturbate, on which they urge viewers to give the couple tips to perform certain crowdsourced requests. Gibson, whose full-time job is working as a nurse practitioner, said the exposure of the content is, quote, an illegal invasion of my privacy and designed to humiliate me and my family. Rick, there are many threads to discuss here, but I guess I want to start at the beginning. In your mind, was this important information for voters to have learned before they head to the polls later this year?
Yeah, I think it is. Candidates spend a great deal of time and money marketing themselves to prospective voters. So if you go on Susanna Gibson's own campaign site, you'll see all these photos of her where she's clearly depicting herself in two ways, as a professional.
As a nurse.
Yep. And as a mother and a family member. So here we have a revelation that contrasts really strongly with the image she's presenting. So it's crucial here to understand she's a public figure, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but she raised her hand to run for office.
Yeah. And so now this is all fair game, and if she's marketing herself and she's counting on winning votes based on people's impression of the kind of person she is, then if she did something in her history which depicts a very different kind of impression to the voters, then I don't see how she can complain about that. I mean, this is like, you're just saying like, yeah, you want to depict yourself in one way, but you got this history. Let voters decide.
And the Washington Post, in its initial story, did say that this information was brought to them by someone on the Republican side of the ledger. And obviously they did their own due diligence and made sure this was indeed the case. But if you were the editor whose desk this came across, obviously you're going to fact check this for obvious reasons, but there's no time that you don't question, if true, whether it's newsworthy.
No, I don't think so. And look, because you'd want to ask questions like, truth is one part. The other thing is relevance.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is this really even relevant to somebody who's competing for this job? And I would say, well, it certainly raises questions about judgment. It wasn't that somebody illegally or, secretly taped sex acts at her home.
Yeah, we'd all agree that'd be a terrible thing.
Yeah, it'd be a terrible thing. And you say, like, yeah, that's private and that, but apparently she and her husband streamed this. I mean, This is for viewing by strangers. Okay, so that there's a question about judgment. Like, if you do that sort of thing, are you really the sort of person who should be running for public office? Knowing that, this stuff gets out. The other thing is, if she was kind of running for the kind of job for which you need a security clearance, right? Now she's running for the state legislature, so like she probably doesn't, but
members of Congress see things and
and the reason like security clearance is they want to know about things like, do you have any gambling debts? Is there anything in your past that could expose you to bribery attempts? Like where you might want to pay money or do favors to some people that have an interest in what you're doing as a legislator because
for fear of something being revealed.
Right, exactly. And the fact that she didn't reveal this, I mean, that kind of opens up this question, well, is this something you could have been bribed about? If somebody, instead of going to the press, right, after she had become elected, could they have gone to her and said, like, we've got these videos of you and we're going to expose it to the constituents if you don't, like, vote this way in this legislation? I mean, it seems to me that this is very relevant.
Now, it seems like there's sort of been three responses to this, and I'll try to characterize them as best I can. On the Republican side, or at least her opponent so far, in my mind, has taken a pretty wise course saying, well, basically not saying much other than this is just an unfortunate event for her and her family, and not commenting in any broad ways because, frankly, I'm sure he wants to just let the evidence here sort of speak for itself. And then there's Democrats who I don't know what the split is, if it's 50-50 or in favor one way or the other, but I think there are some who say that clearly she knew this was out there and that she knew this was something she was participating in. And there's probably nothing wrong with that, like if you're a regular person. But when you run for office, especially in a race that is really up for grabs, it's kind of a swing district in that part of Virginia. And not only is it a swing district, there is a lot of people believe that it's going to be really close to see which party takes control of that chamber. So it's critical in all sorts of ways. And so there's some people who say, knowing she's part of this, it just seems like she should have either disclosed this to the party, saying, hey, just so you know, this is in my background, and they might have tried to steer her in a different direction, or that she should have just realized that she's not the right candidate at all and not run. So I think there's some people there in the Democratic side who say this just shows, like you said, maybe poor judgment. There's also, I think, some Democrats who say that this is a private matter. There's nothing she was doing that was illegal. Nobody's, I don't think, really concerned about that. And that she's going to vote on issues that Democrats care about in ways that they support when it comes to things like abortion and other economic issues and other environmental issues in the state. And what she and her husband happen to do in their private time, or how they want to share that private time with others, really is no one else's business. So it seems like those are sort of the three camps that folks have aligned themselves with. Setting aside the Republican side, do you think that the side that says this shouldn't matter because, she has a private life and we should respect that, do you think that is a strong argument?
No, I don't think it is. And in fact, I don't think it's an argument that very many Democrats agreed with when Republicans were saying similar things about Donald Trump. This is so predictable. This is what, in partisan politics, people on the side of somebody who's been accused of some kind of wrongdoing will often claim, like, it's not really relevant, or it's not that bad, or it's a kind of consequentialist response, right? Like, yeah, this isn't very good, but what's really important is the issue. So just, hold your nose and vote for the candidate because these issues are so important and the candidate's going to vote for these issues. The problem is when they're out there, fundraising and campaigning and everything else, they're also criticizing the opponent based on things like character, right? And this is pretty standard for both parties. And so I just view this not as serious defense. It's just damage control. It's just spin, right?
And maybe gives people who still want to support her a way to talk about why they still want to support her.
Unfortunately, I would say, like for many people in politics, it's their real view. Like character doesn't matter at all. All that matters is, like, do we win on the issues because we've got this agenda that we want to push, and that's what politics is all about. Is about kind of winning on the agenda. But I don't think that's what politics is all about. I think politicians, they also serve. In our nation, they serve as people to look up to. They serve as, whether we want to say it or not, they serve as models for citizenship. And in the state legislature, these are people that they go to schools, they make speeches at public events. So they kind of, in a way, as representatives, they represent the citizenry, and we want them to represent the best of us. And you can't say, well, yeah, some of them represent the best of us. Other ones, we don't really care for their private life, but just ignore that, look the other way, and focus on how they represent our interests.
So I'm going to take a little trip through history here carefully, because I don't want to draw a direct comparison between what this we're talking about today and something that happened some time ago. But I think you'll see where I'm going. I saw an interesting column, and I don't know, it's been some time, but it was in the last 10 years, saying that like Ronald Reagan or not like Ronald Reagan, one thing he did, sort of unintentionally did, was he, in some ways, normalized divorce. He was our first divorce president, and I don't think he talked about it a lot, but he didn't hide from it. I mean, he was a public figure for a long time, and his first wife was pretty widely known, and obviously then there was Nancy. And if I remember the column correctly, it was saying that, and again, he was running for election in like the late 70s, and that was a whole different time than now. And not that people did get divorced back then, but it was not looked at maybe the same way it's looked at now. So in some ways, this author of this column said, if my memory's right, is that like Reagan or don't like Reagan's policies, he really made being divorced seem like less of a big deal. That it sort of made it seem more culturally okay. And again, here's where the awkward jumps start to happen. But then we had Bill Clinton and his shenanigans in the White House and extramarital affairs. And then we get into allegations around what former President Trump did and some possible sexual assault allegations that came around him. And of course, as the moment we're recording, at least, he's the front runner for the Republican nomination. And now we have this, and obviously she's not running for president and probably won't, but this is another issue where people are, like you, saying, do we want the people we elect to represent the very best of us and to be role models? I would imagine, though, if you could take a time capsule back to 1979, there were probably a few people saying, my gosh, are we really going to elect a divorced man to be the president of the United States? Now, that's laughable now. I don't think, and I mean, of all the things we consider to be president, being divorced is pretty low on the list. But times change, and does framing it up that way make you think about things any differently? I'm not sure I do, but I just wanted to raise the point.
Like we have to be careful that we're not holding politicians to standards that we don't really expect ourselves to live up to, and that aren't in some ways actually really reasonable standards to even hold anymore in this society. So you don't want to say, okay, we want our politicians to live according to standards that were appropriate from 30 years ago, but not today's standards. And this is, by the way, part of the controversy over, like, should the Senate have a dress code?
Yeah,
right? Well, what's wrong with, wearing sweatpants to the Senate? I think there is something wrong with it. I think there's a reason to have a dress code. But, I mean, I think it's worth debating. Like, what's the purpose of having a dress code? What's the purpose of not using profanity? Plenty of people use profanity in their everyday life. Doesn't matter if politicians do it. Doesn't matter.
Sometimes during State of the Union addresses.
Right. Yeah. I think it's really regrettable. And I don't think much of politicians that use profanity. I wouldn't vote for one who regularly use profanity on their stump speeches or, in their campaign ads. Some people would find no problem with that. They might even be attracted to a candidate.
It might seem genuine, I suppose, to some people.
Right. In the same way as dressing down does.
Yeah.
So here we have Susanna Gibson and her husband who streamed video to a pornographic website. Now, this is apparently a subscription site, and I don't have any idea what else is on there. I've never gone to it. I don't know anything. I haven't even researched it. But it's a pornographic website. Now, here's one of the things that we know about pornography is that it's a real problem in our country, and these pornographic websites are very involved in the human trafficking trade, in which we have mostly young women, a lot of them really enslaved, and that's where a lot of the content from many of these sites come. It is a real problem. I think it's one of these really important issues that I wish we would do something about, because we have, we have slavery actually taking place here in America, and we're not even talking about it. We spend a lot of time talking about the legacy of slavery. We don't talk about people this is forced and degrading work. And
just I want to be clear that you think that this couple, of course, wasn't participating in that particular slavery, but they were helping an industry that benefits from that.
Yes, this is an industry that's rife with it. And this is one of the things I think our legislators should be doing something about it. I mean, I think it's a really important issue. And many of our legislators are ignoring it, would I expect. And by the way, and Virginia is one of these states that we really need to focus on. And so is she going to do something about that? I doubt it, right? So I think this is relevant. I think you have to put it into the context of like what's actually going on here, and like why in the world would she think this is a good thing to do? And then the other thing, soliciting money at the time, this is just really ugly.
I mean, I think the question I keep coming back to is that if you think this, and I don't necessarily disagree at all, that this is proper to, like you said, voters should know about about her behavior. But there's obviously some things, and I'm not sure what they are, maybe we'll come up with a few, that are truly should be private between, that are there. So I guess where do you draw that line?
Well, what about gambling? So there's a lot of people that really dislike gambling, but, like others don't think there's anything wrong with it. So if we find out that, a candidate has not disclosed that they regularly take trips to Las Vegas.
So gambling in a legal way.
Yeah, in a legal way, but, and they've lost a lot of money over time, but I think it's relevant. I think it's like, well, you're going to be in charge of budgets, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I can see a lot of people saying that doesn't matter. I think it would. I think it would go to judgment. I think there's a lot of things where we're talking about behavior that people have questions about. I think we should have access to it. We should know what's going on. And I understand why some people say, well, that's private. That's just like what I do as a private citizen. Well, if you are a private citizen, yeah, that's private. But now you're asking to be a public figure. Now, even within that, there are a number of things that are private. I mean, we do draw the line, like what our candidates are doing with their families. So when they're on vacation and what they're doing, that's their business, and you want to draw kind of a boundary, especially regarding kids, mm-hmm. right?
Yeah.
What they do with their kids, and draw kind of boundaries around that. But then we can clearly see, like, that's not really relevant to our interest in how they function as a legislator.
But at the top level of our political world right now, there's a lot of talk about certain politicians and candidates' health. We've all seen the tape of Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell sort of freeze up in front of the cameras, and it's been awkward to watch. And, you get a report from a physician, I think, in the Senate that says, oh, no, there's nothing to see here. And every year the president goes for a physical, and you always get back, pretty scrub clean records, it seems, that, they're on a minor blood pressure medication, but otherwise everything's great. And I mean, how much of that, and I guess probably maybe for me the answer is it's much more important if you're the president of the United States versus a member of the House of Delegates in Virginia. But is it really a stair step about how much we should know about that person depending on the importance of his or her job?
Yeah, I think it is. It's like, so like the president or a senator has arthritis in their knee, we don't need to know about that. But like if they're at the beginning stages of dementia and it's a diagnosed condition, if they've got other things that could compromise their judgment, the kind of work that we expect our representatives and elected officials to do is very taxing. And so knowing something about their health, are they up to the task? I think that's relevant.
Before we close on this topic, I wanted to kind of circle back and look at this a different way. I started off by asking about you being in the chair of a newspaper editor, and this story comes to you, and you seem pretty clear that as long as the facts prove out that this is a story. I'm going to put you in a different chair now. You're a top-level campaign manager. In this case, we'll make you either Susanna Gibson's opponent's campaign manager or someone in the Republican Party of Virginia, and somebody brings to you this report and has pretty good proof that what they say is happening is indeed happening. Do you think you would do a similar approach, that you would just contact, in this case, the biggest news operation in their region and say, here's the story, here's all we got, we think this is important, go for it? Or would you have a different way of maybe handling that?
No, I think that's the appropriate form to handle that, because it's, you want to make sure that whatever sources you had were true. You'd want to make sure that it's relevant. But if your judgment is going to be, that it's ultimately the press's decision to make sure it's relevant. Now, this is different than, say, reporting something to tabloids, where you think, like, yeah, they're not going to have very high standards for, like anything that's kind of gossipy or malicious. They're going to go ahead and run it because it's going to get clicks. That's different. But something like this, you say, well, this really happened. We've got reliable sources, and this is the sort of thing that respectable news organizations are going to run because it's clearly relevant. I would say, yeah, I would have no hesitation.
And I would tack on to that whoever this person who leaked this to the Post is absolutely smart enough to know that the Post, and for something that the Post knows is going to be a big story if true, that they're going to do a lot of good due diligence on this.
Yeah.
And that I think they were right to assume that it would get more attention and more of a spotlight because it came from there versus somebody doing a Twitter thread and maybe sharing a link to the video or I don't know what else.
Well, or even if it came from a really right-wing publication, say like the Washington Times or something like that. It comes, that's going to have different kind of reception, right? Mm-hmm. And probably be treated with more skepticism.
Yeah, so I thought it was interesting. I mean, and I don't want to paint too broad of a brush here, but there are a lot of people on the right side of our politics today who use the term fake news and point at institutions just like the Washington Post. And in this case, the Washington Post's doggedness as a journalistic institution, I think, paid off for Republicans in this state because it really showed that they really reported this accurately and fairly. And I don't know, who knows? Maybe I'd haven't looked closely enough. Maybe there is even more the Post was given that they couldn't quite fact check out. So maybe they left a couple snippets out because they couldn't quite confirm. I don't know that. But I think and I would say the same thing for any of the other traditional news sources, and I would say the same thing for any of the newspapers in our company, that they would have the respect in their communities to report this fair and accurately. And I think in some ways that is exactly what role the press should be playing.
Right. Here's another way to look at this. When you ask, should the press have run it, or should you reveal it, provide it to the press? And is it relevant? Is it important enough? She's running for something I would say is kind of equivalent to the board of directors for one of the top companies in the U.S., right? So if you are, say, on a search committee for a really big company, say like Apple or Microsoft or Google or something like that, and you have a candidate for a top position and this comes to light, would you say, yeah, that's really relevant? Of course you would, right? Because and just in the past year, we've had CEOs of all kinds of really major corporations resign after things like this being revealed about,
or less than this sometimes.
Much less than this. So, this is something that really surprises me, and it surprises me about the kind of defense that many Democrats are giving. I mean, I know that they're saying we're kind of stuck with her now, and we have to say something to kind of salvage this election. But you have people defending this conduct, saying it's not really relevant, when like they would never say that about the same revelations coming out about the CEO of some major company. Would say that's scandalous. That damages the reputation of that company. Why do we have such low standards for our own government?
I've not been following this every turn of this case or this story, but I don't think this has come out yet. And I would be curious, if I were advising her, this might be my position, is to say, we may be too far down the line here to get another candidate. There's always ballot access issues and all sorts of things that kind of muddy this up. And we know that this is an important race, and that we know, as if I'm speaking here as a Democrat, that we want to get, the majority in this chamber. So my advice to her would be, you come out and say that I am going to be the best representative for these voters that I can be, and I pledge to do this for only 2 years. And that 2 years from now, that'll give my party and any other party who's interested time to field another round of candidates, and we'll move on from that. But this is too important for the state, she could say, and too important for this party to allow Republicans to get this spot. So I'll pledge to work as hard as I can for those 2 years and then hand the keys off to somebody else. How would you feel about that approach?
Yeah, I think it's better than trying to defend it or trying to say it's irrelevant. For one thing, so whenever you try to defend something like this or say it doesn't matter, it puts you in this awkward position of not really being able to criticize a candidate from the other side for something similar, right? And what we get is what's often called a race to the bottom. Like, we accept more and more bad behavior because we want to always defend our own side. And then we have the other side pointing to, well, what about your candidate, right? So I think there has to be something like that. Either she drops out of the race, if that's not feasible for, it really is too late. I don't think that's a recipe for winning the election.
Yeah, it may not be.
Yeah, I just don't see it being practical.
And, and it does make me think, and I guess this, again, if there's a bit of sunshine out of this story, at least voters in Virginia have an advantage that voters on 2 years ago in Long Island didn't have, and that was they elected to the Congress George Santos and knew nothing about his very, very, very checkered past.
Yeah.
And weeks afterwards, there was a story that came out that I promise you, if that had come out 3 weeks, even 2 weeks before the election, he never would have gotten in. It was a close election. So I guess the good news here is that the people in this district in Virginia know this and can look at this, talk to their friends about it, and have plenty of time to make the right decision for them, and they're not going to be caught wishing they knew it before Election Day. At least they have all the facts.
One really important difference is George Santos lied about his background.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And Susanna Gibson has not lied. She just omitted.
She withheld.
Withheld information. But she didn't lie about it, and she acknowledges it now. I'm not sure that she's in any position she could do anything different. But I think it's worse to lie about it.
We end each show by tackling an ethical dilemma, and Rick, here is my question for you. Way back when, in your first year in college, you dated a woman for a few months. You both enjoyed your time together, but eventually you just both agreed to move on. You have nothing bad to say about her or your short relationship. About 10 years after the two of you dated, she becomes a famous movie star. And she still is one today. How eager are you to share the story of those few months with people you know?
Probably would be. It kind of depends on what movies. Like, do I like any of this movie star's movies? Is it somebody like Julia Roberts? Absolutely.
Okay,
I mean, there are some other movie stars I'm not sure I would want to be
So here's what I did to prepare for the show. I think I know about the year you were born, so I did a quick Google search of who are the famous. This person, again, I want to stress very hypothetically, unless you're going to share a big secret here, Meg Ryan.
Oh yeah.
You like Meg? You think she's
she's fantastic. I really like her movies. I know nothing about her other than what she's made in the movies, but that would be really fun. That would make for like good stories to share. And of course, so if a friend revealed something like that, I'd want to know more. Like, so what
they're going to have a bunch of questions.
What was she like in college? How did you meet her? Like, what did you still stay in touch? Yeah, all that would be really fun to know. And so if I had any information like that, I'd want to share it. Unless I would say the only thing that would give me pause is like if there was just something about the relationship that I really didn't want to share for some reason. But if it's a kind of normal relationship where we know each other and and dated and then went our separate ways, that would be great.
And do you think it would? Again, you've never been in this situation. I'm guessing you did not date any famous movie stars back in your college days.
Not even close.
But do you think? I mean, and you met your wife in college, I think, but after. I kind of framed this up as your first semester in college. You meet this person and you met your wife a couple of years later. Do you think this, would this make her uncomfortable if you're, sitting around at a cocktail party and telling your Meg Ryan story again?
It might, and my current spouse, right? No.
Okay, that's
She would,
would she tell the story?
Yeah, she probably would.
Can you believe that Rick Kite chose me over Meg Ryan? I mean, that'd be a pretty nice thing.
It would be pretty nice, and but I could imagine there's like this is a touchy subject with many couples. Is like how much do you disclose about past relationships and then how much do you disclose publicly? Because it's one thing to talk about past relationships with your partner.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's healthy and very, very important to do. I think it's another thing to be talking about those relationships publicly, whether it's in the presence of your partner or not, and then to keep doing it. So one of the problems with this, you wouldn't want it to be a regular topic of conversation that comes up every time you meet somebody.
Yeah. You're like, Rick's the guy who dated Meg Ryan, however many years ago. That you wouldn't want that to be on your business card or
I wouldn't want to be the person who is always bringing up a 40-year-old kind of casual relationship rather than talking about like the person I'm in love with now.
Mm-hmm.
Like why would I? That would just show a kind of insensitivity, I think.
So in full disclosure, the reason I brought this up, and I also did not date any current or former movie stars, but I occasionally read a column in the New York Times called The Ethicist. Yep. And this was kind of a slightly different question that was asked in that column. And in the column in the New York Times, how it was presented was this, I think it was, they didn't give an age, but I think it was probably, a gentleman in his 50s had dated a woman who became a famous musician later in life. But he's never told his wife all these years. And that he'll play her music a bit. And his wife's even said, you must be a big fan of singer X. They never mentioned in the column who it was. And he's like, is it too late to tell my wife this now? And I think, to my mind, maybe it is. At some point, if you had dated Meg Ryan in college and just now decided to tell your wife about it today, she might think that's a little strange.
It would indicate there's still some lingering feelings, or there's some guilt or something like that. If it wasn't something, because when you're going through the process of kind of forming a relationship, you tell all kinds of things about yourself, about how you grew up, experiences. Like you share lots of stories, and that's part of what makes you close. And it's almost like the people that you become really close to, you kind of develop this feeling that it's almost like you grew up together.
Yeah.
Right? Because you know each other's history so well. And so if there's some significant relationship you hold out of that.
Especially someone that
And
It's like kind of famous.
because why wouldn't you mention that?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Because that seems really obvious that you would. And so, and then to hold that back for many years and then suddenly reveal that, I would have some raised eyebrows about that. Like what's going on in your head there that you reveal that
40 years later,
40
or
years
whatever
later.
it is. Yeah. So this is your chance, Rick. Again, last call. You never dated a movie star, a TV star, a star of a hit top 40 song.
I'm going to make it really clear here publicly on this podcast. I absolutely, categorically never dated Meg Ryan.
Well, if Meg Ryan is listening, I'm sure you'd be happy to hear from her, though, right?
Oh, yeah, I would answer that email.
You would answer that email, and who knows, maybe she is a fan of the Ethical Life podcast. And we hope Meg Ryan and everybody else listening subscribes to the Ethical Life podcast, and that can be done on Apple Podcasts, on Google Podcasts, or Spotify. And whether you're Meg Ryan or not, be sure to check out Rick's column about ethics, and that can be found on all Lee newspaper websites. For Rick Kite, I am Scott Rada. Thank you for joining us.